Have you ever really stopped to think about what makes the US Constitution work? I mean, it's not just some old piece of paper, right? It's this incredibly complex and honestly brilliant blueprint for how to handle power. So let's dive in and unpack the 7 core principles that have been shaping American government for over 200 years. This quote right here gets to the heart of the entire problem the founders were trying to solve. James Madison, one of the main architects of the Constitution, just put it perfectly. If people were angels, we wouldn't need government. Simple enough. But the people who run the government aren't angels either. So how in the world do you solve a puzzle like that? And that really is the great challenge, isn't it? The whole Constitution is basically an answer to this one question. It's this amazing piece of political engineering designed to build a government that's strong enough to be effective, but also restrained. It's like a machine built not only to govern, but also to control itself. So where do you even start with a problem that big? Well, you start with the most fundamental question of all. Who's really in charge? Where does the power come from in the first place? And the answer the framers came up with was, for its time, totally radical. It comes from us, the citizens. This big idea is called popular sovereignty. Let's break it down. Popular comes from populace, meaning people, and sovereignty just means the ultimate power to rule. So put them together and you get the absolute bedrock of American democracy. The people are the ultimate source of the government's power. The government can only rule with our permission, the consent of the governed. And you can see this idea woven right into the fabric of the country. I mean, just look at the first 3 words of the Constitution's preamble. We, the people. It doesn't say we, the king, or we, the government. It's us. And the most direct way we express that power, every single time we step into a voting booth to choose who represents us. And that idea of choosing representatives leads us straight to the next principle, republicanism. Now, the founders were a little nervous about a pure, direct democracy. They worried that a simple majority could just run roughshod over everyone else's rights. So they built a republic, a representative democracy. We don't vote on every single law ourselves. Instead, we elect people to go and make those decisions for us. Okay, so the power starts with the people. But once we hand that power over, how do you keep it from being abused? Well, this next set of principles is all about the architecture, the actual blueprint for splitting up and distributing that power so no one gets too much of it. First up, you separate it. This idea was heavily inspired by thinkers like Baron de Montesquieu. The framers decided to split the federal government's power into 3 totally separate and independent branches. The goal was simple, but really profound. Make absolutely sure that no single person or group could get their hands on all the levers of power at the same time. And this separation gives us the 3 branches we all know. You've got the legislative branch, that's Congress. Their job is to make the laws. Then there's the executive branch, headed up by the president, and their job is to enforce those laws. And finally, you have the judicial branch, the courts, who get to interpret what the laws actually mean. Each one stays in its own lane. But the dividing and conquering of power doesn't stop there. The next layer of this blueprint is federalism. Now, this splits power vertically, sharing it between the one national government in D.C. and the 50 different state governments. Madison actually called this a double security for the people's rights, and it's still at the center of some of our biggest political debates today. What this does is create a kind of division of labor. The federal government handles the big picture stuff for the whole country, like declaring war or managing the currency. But the states, they hold on to power over things that are more local, like setting up schools or running their own elections. It's this constant push and pull, a real balancing act. All right, so power comes from the people, and then it's sliced and diced horizontally and vertically. But what stops one of those pieces from getting too big for its britches? This is where the last set of principles comes into play. Think of them like a series of safety levers built right into the machine to keep it under control. The first safety lever is the idea of limited government. This basically means the Constitution is the ultimate rulebook, and the government is only allowed to do what's written inside. That's it. And nobody, not even the president, is above the law. The whole point is to stop the abuse of power by drawing really clear lines in the sand. And that brings us to what is probably the most famous principle of all, checks and balances. See, it's not enough to just separate the powers. You have to give each branch the actual tools to fight back, to check the power of the others. This is the really active, competitive part of the design. We see it all the time. A president vetoing a law or a court striking one down as unconstitutional. That's it in action. And Madison, yet again, just nails the reason why. He knew politicians are ambitious people. It's just human nature. So the genius of the system is that it harnesses that ambition. It creates a structure where, as he said, ambition must be made to counteract ambition. A president's desire for more power is checked by Congress's desire to protect its own power. It's a brilliant, even if a little cynical, design. And if you want a really powerful example of a check, just look at impeachment. It's a two-step process. First, the House of Representatives acts kind of like a grand jury. They vote on whether to bring a formal accusation. That's what impeachment is. Then it moves to the Senate, which holds a trial to decide if that official should actually be convicted and kicked out of office. It's the legislature's ultimate weapon against the other branches. Finally, we get to the whole reason for this entire complicated system: protecting individual rights. I mean, why go to all this trouble to limit, divide, and check government power? It's all to protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, things like freedom of speech and religion that are spelled out, mostly, in the Bill of Rights. So we've walked through the whole blueprint, we've seen how it all fits together, but what does all this complex stuff actually mean for us today? Why does this 200-year-old design even matter in the real world?
Well, the biggest result is a system that can feel, well, painfully slow sometimes, and that can be frustrating. But here's the key: that slowness is a feature, not a bug. The founders wanted to slow things down. They wanted to force debate and compromise, instead of letting the government make rash, emotional decisions. And all this complexity serves some really vital purposes. It forces the different branches, and by extension different political parties, to try and work together. It gives regular citizens like us tons of different access points: voting, calling our representatives, protesting, to make our voices heard. At the end of the day, it's all designed to make sure no single group can just take over and run the whole show. Which really brings us to the big question for today. This whole system, built on a pretty deep understanding of human nature and a healthy fear of power, was a revolutionary concept. But now, in our world of intense political division and lightning-fast change, does this intricate machine of ambition counteracting ambition still do its job? Does it still protect liberty and serve the public good? That, I think, is something for all of us to think about.